Finn, if you'd like to turn on your video and sound and start proceedings, that would be lovely.
Hi everyone, hello, welcome to this event hosted by Festival of Debate and with us Andro and Eve. My name's Finn, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm the Artistic Director and Chief Exec of Andro and Eve. We are a queer arts organisation from Sheffield but working across South Yorkshire to create events to celebrate queer culture. And it's really wonderful that you can join us tonight for this event. We are exploring gender and drag beyond the binary. So we've set up this event with some wonderful artists who I'll introduce in a minute. Just to let you know, we're working with a safer spaces policy tonight. You will have received a copy of that with your ticket link. Just remember to being respectful and kind and considerate when asking questions. There'll be lots of opportunities to ask questions tonight, and we hope you learn a lot through being here and enjoy the discussion that's going to go ahead. So, just throughout the event, you can type questions in the Q&A. And the Q&A is there and we will answer those questions, but we'll start the event with this introduction from me, and then we'll introduce the artists, and I've got some questions to ask to kick us off, and then we'll hear your questions and the things you'd like to know from our artists tonight. So we've got some brilliant artists with us. We have drag king Wesley Dykes, we've got drag king Sigi Moonlight, and drag queen Lilly Snatchdragon. And I'll tell you a bit more about them in a minute. But what we're going to do now is we're just going to do a little bit of a drag and gender 101. So we have the drag beyond the binary as our event tonight, and I thought it'd be really helpful for everyone out there who's perhaps not aware or maybe just needs a little bit of an introduction or an update, just some terms we might use tonight so everyone's really clear on what things mean. So we might refer to cis or cisgender people. That means someone whose gender is the same as that which was assigned at birth. And then transgender is someone whose gender is different from that which was assigned at birth. So we might use that word and we might shorten that to trans. Our next word is non-binary, genderqueer, gender fluid, two-spirit. And they can come under the umbrella term of third gender, we might call that, in many different parts of the world. Non-binary is a more modern word to refer to people a bit like genderqueer who do not feel the binary terms of male and female fit them. So they might be gender fluid and move between, or might feel very strongly they're no gender within the non-binary, or have some mix of different genders, masculine and feminine. And two-spirit is a term for originating in America from the 1990s to describe people over in America from Native American places who have a two-spirit gender identity, moving between masculine and feminine, and a connection between the spiritual world and the physical world, and they're very revered in their culture. And I put that there because sometimes in LGBTQIA you might see a 2 at the end, and 2 refers to two-spirit. And then we've got agender, and that's someone who doesn't identify with any gender. And then we have AFAB, which just is shortened for assigned female at birth, and AMAB, assigned male at birth. And those are terms that we wouldn't necessarily use about somebody else, but they might be helpful when people are talking about their own gender. They may say, I am AFAB or AMAB, to kind of talk about their gender journey. But again, it's not something we put on somebody else, that's something we put to help ourselves talk about our LGBTQI or gender identity. And then we have G and C, which is gender non-conforming, and that can be really helpful when we're talking about gender, because gender has, in a lot of people's minds, set roles and ways we learn about things. So we think about certain traits being masculine and certain being feminine, and when we don't conform, we're gender non-conforming. So that's a little introduction to gender. And of course, we will be talking about drag kings and drag queens. And I think a lot of you might know what a drag king is, or drag queen, but some of you might not. So a drag queen is generally someone who puts on various items of clothing or padding or makeup to look like a very caricatured version of femaleness. And generally we think of people who are drag queens being people of a different gender underneath all that makeup and wig and hair, but that often is not the case, and we'll think about more about that tonight. And then drag kings are people who put on various costumes or packing, strapping to be able to look like a masculine character. And again, they might be people under there who identify as women, but they may not as well. So we'll talk a bit about that. But drag kings are something Andro and Eve celebrates and supports through our night called the Kingdom Come, and we celebrate all kinds of cabaret acts through Rate Queer Do. So tonight we are joined by Wesley Dykes. Follow these artists on their social media handles. Mr. Wesley Dykes on the Instagram. Wesley Dykes is a really exciting drag king who was born after noticing a considerable lack of black artists in drag king scenes around the world. And since returning to the UK in 2015, Wesley has been able to incorporate a love of writing and movement into their stage show, and they are a proud member of the Cocoa Butter Club and regularly performing at nights throughout the UK, including Boy Box, and they are an excellent and exciting drag king to watch. So we're excited to be joined by them. Then we've got Lilly Snatchdragon. This is Lilly on stage here. Lilly is an international award-winning political comedy drag queen, burlesque artist and compere. Her approach to how the West stereotypes Southeast Asian women won her Best Newcomer at the London Cabaret Awards in 2015. She's been in the top 10 UK burlesque performers since 2015, including number 1 in 2017 and number 5 in the UK in 2019. Lilly's also one of the founders of the sellout show Lads and the renowned all-Asian cabaret collective The Bitten Peach. So there's Lilly. And last but not least, we've got Sigi Moonlight. Sigi's also a member of The Bitten Peach and has performed all over, from clowning at Glastonbury to Shakespeare's Globe. They are inspired by old movies, and they usually take on a series of iconic, traditionally masculine personas in their shows, from Kung Fu Master to Dangerous Criminal and even an Oscar statuette. Sigi's performance investigate ideas of toxic masculinity, such as challenging the way Hollywood emasculates East Asian men in media. And outside of drag, Jackie Bard-Lang is currently studying a postgraduate acting diploma at Drama Studio London. So, some really exciting panellists with us tonight, and I think it might be time to join them. So, we've also got, just to head up, we've got Eli and Chloe with 2 asterisks in front of their names, and there are Andro and Eve volunteers, and if there's anything that you're not sure about and you'd like to ask them direct, anything about how things are going, and similarly, like, we've got Opus on the chat too, so you can ask them things or just comment, and Eli and Chloe will probably pick it up. So panellists, can you pop on and we'll say hello to you properly. Hello, Sigi. Hello, Lilly. Hello, Wesley. Do you want to just introduce yourselves now that you're on screen? Just say your names and your pronouns, please.
I'll go first.
Go on, Sigi.
My name's Sigi Moonlight, or Jackie Bard-Lang out of drag. In drag, I go by he or they. Out of drag, I go by she or her. Is that all you needed?
That's all we need for now. I'm sure we'll get into stuff later. Hi, cool. Lilly.
Oh, yeah, go on, Lilly.
Do you want me to go? Hi, I'm Lilly Snatchdragon. I use the pronouns she, her at all occasions. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Lilly. Go on, Wesley.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Wesley Dykes. In drag, I use he, they pronouns. Outside of drag, I go by a they and they pronouns or no pronouns.
Yeah. Well, it's wonderful for you to be here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to kick off with a question for all of you. And I'd like to know how long you've been doing drag and how did you get into it? I think we'll start off with Sigi, if that's okay.
Yeah. I started drag actually, I think practically 4 years ago. I'd heard about Adam All and Apple. derrieres, and I actually did a workshop with them when they came up north to Sheffield with Andro and Eve. So actually, you guys were my intro to drag, and then shortly following that, about a month after, I gathered the nerves and courage to take part in a massive drag king competition at the Glory in London called Man Up, and I came 3rd place. And from then, shows and things have just gone, from gig to gig and contact to contact, and here I am.
Fantastic. Lily, how about you? How did you get into drag, and how long have you been doing it?
So I've been doing drag for about 8 years now. This year will be my 9th year. And I got into drag because I am a failed actor. Yeah, I basically I kind of fell into it a little bit by accident. Someone who moved into the house share that I was staying at when I first moved into London to, make my dreams come true of being a Shakespearean actor, and realized very shortly that was just not going to happen. And I went to a burlesque cabaret show and was like, this seems more than what I should be doing. So I kind of got pushed into the deep end with it, and I've kind of never really looked back, to be honest.
Fantastic. And Wesley, how about you?
I started doing drag 8 years ago now. I fell into it by accident. I was living in a small town in Canada, and I'd never really seen drag performers like much before. And there were actually like a 5-king crew that lived in this small town, and they were nothing like fancy or anything, but they were literally just the only drag kings I'd ever seen. And I was like, oh, this is a thing that like lots of types of people can do. Sweet. So I just used Halloween of that year to try out the thing, and it's been that way ever since.
Brilliant, thank you. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to show a video, a bit of Sigi performing, and that way, for those of you who've never seen a drag king or not seen Sigi performing, you'll be able to see that. So Joe, are you all right to share that? And I'll get off the screen.
So that would be coming out, I guess. But I'm not going to tell them myself. And I'm not the only Asian who's felt this way.
I can do the sexy. Who want to see me do sexy?
I can't imagine now a life without drag. Like, it is part of me. My character is an extension of who I am.
Do you find that when you were younger, there were things that you just kept suppressed?
Yeah, most certainly. When I was younger, I just didn't ever consider sexuality to be a thing you needed to enjoy or partake in. I was pretty much the stereotypically perfect Asian child, I was doing violin, GCSEs, no problem. It wasn't until university that I kind of opened my mind up a bit more. I realised, okay, I need to embrace my queerness, I need to embrace my sexuality, I can't suppress it any longer. I'm in a stage where I'm very happy and I'm very much in control of, like, my happiness and my life.
I'm inspired by how drag has given Jackie so much confidence in her sexuality.
Thanks, Joe.
So I want to...
Hey. I love that, Sigi.
I like the cut to the sexuality. Hello Kitty mug.
Yeah. No coincidence there then. Yeah. Do you want to tell us anything about that program? Because I think for people watching, they might want to go and watch it on the iPlayer or whatever, what it's all about.
Yeah. I was approached by BBC shortly before COVID, I think. It was like 2 years ago. They were looking for people who were to be subjects of a show hosted by Elaine Chong, who's a British Asian journalist, talking about her various sort of aspects of personality and being British East Asian, which is the name of the series. And it was just, after an interview, they liked me. They thought that my journey was quite similar in terms to hers, in terms of how I looked at my sexuality and also how that relates to my Asianness. And then the final, what happened in the course of the documentary, if you watch it, is that I do a little bit of a drag king workshop with her, and I sort of show her the Bitten Peach, I take her to a wonderful show that we did in the Cock Tavern in Kennington, which was like a Bitten Peach takeover. And she did a little show about her coming out and sort of embracing that queer side of her. So that was that little bit there. And it was really cool. It was just before COVID that it was all filmed. So really lucky there.
Oh, brilliant. And that's on iPlayer now, is it? Anyone can watch it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to post a link there in the chat so people can go and have a look, because it's great to see that representation, isn't it? And be able to be out there. So nice one. So a question, I'm going to go Wesley next. I've got this question for you, and I'd like to know, I'm going to ask it off everyone, but Wesley first, what has drag given to you?
Oh, God. Pay my bills. I think what drag has given me is it's like a constant reminder that like life is a joke, and despite how like systematically and institutionally marginalized some of us have been by trash systems, ultimately it's all just a bit fucking bizarre. And that's great to be reminded of.
Yeah, I really get you there though. Like, there's something wonderful about entering a room and everyone's just like, well, life outside is fairly awful and hellish, but in here we're just going to take the mick out of it and just be relentlessly joyful about it. That is a power in that, isn't there?
Exactly.
Yeah. What about you, Lily?
Personally, drag has given me a reason to discover who I actually am. I think I've spent the majority of my life, even though I am mixed race, I am half English, half Lao. Despite the fact that I was raised very, very Western, I had very much traditional Asian values kind of fisted down my throat. And I think I was very much hidden with a lot of things. And I think drag has given me the ability to have body confidence. It's given me the ability to also really explore how queer I actually have always been, but have never allowed myself to be. It's allowed me to just say, oh, can I swear? Is that allowed? I don't know if
we're on a 14 plus today, so.
Okay, so it's allowed me to give me like a massive fuck you to a lot of people, and in a way it's allowed me to speak my mind. For an Asian person who was raised to, you know, be seen and not heard, don't make a problem, don't speak your mind, don't, because it's not worth it, just don't say anything. So having this platform where, despite the fact in some ways I am hiding behind a character, I'm still saying what I'm really thinking. And having that ability is priceless because it's bled into my personal life. And despite the fact that I'm still afraid to, you know, say my real name on this webinar just in case, I'm still, it's like Lily is giving me something to still be able to speak exactly what I want to say, and having that ability is like, I'm very grateful, because otherwise I think I would be very, very unhappy and convince myself that I'm still a straight woman, which I am absolutely not.
Wow, thank you. Oh, thank you for your honesty. That's wonderful. And Sigi, what about you? What's drag given you?
Oh, I mean, listening to both of you, both of your stories and your reasons resonate. There's a bit of Wesley and a bit of Lily. You know, the fact that it pays the bills. The fact that it's a means for me to show a parts of my identity that I don't think would ever have come to the forefront had it not been for this expression. And it's the world of cabaret, where you can kind of play around and do whatever you want. And my approach to it is always, I set the benchmark so low that anything I do creates entertainment and laughter for people. And I think my personal journey has had quite a lot of what might be seen as bad luck or misfortune, but having drag is a means for me to escape and take on different characters and personas that bring joy, but also deliver messages that I think resonate with me personally. A lot of my shows and stuff have a central message that's hidden underneath it, so people can enjoy it. But also, if you want to really read into it, you can look at it and think, oh, actually, yeah, maybe we shouldn't think about East Asian men or women's bodies in such a way that the media and the pop culture around us does. And I guess a more sort of personal note, I I absolutely adore things like Hollywood and classic films, and that culture. And it was a way for me to indulge in all of my passions and interests, and also earn money. It's great.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, you know, there is now a growing visibility of drag in UK culture, and it's good to know that it's paying the bills of people who have been traditionally put on the sidelines, and unfortunately are still on the sidelines. I think we might get into that a bit later, but I feel like it's important to recognise that you are all artists and you all deserve to be paid for the contribution you give, not just the LGBT community, but the art scene in general.
Can I quote you on that? Can I just put that underneath all my emails when people inquire about what my fees are?
Please do. Actually, side note, I've got a new thing to add to my email. I'm completely going off into to speak here, but it actually says something about reciprocity. Oh, I'm bad at words. What's that word when you reciprocate?
Reciprocity?
That's the one. Thank you. Great. Yeah, you can tell you're Siltudian drama. You're good at words. But yeah, that kind of like, you know, when you get the email, there's a straight up thing at the bottom of the thing which says, I'm into this mode, and if you can't offer me money, what else are you offering me? And I think it's not just about like in a capitalist system, like thinking about, we don't always have to do money, but like what other things are we putting in place to look after ourselves, like in our community? Like, are we, you know, what other things? I mean, like when I always like book an artist, I'm always like, right, and I'm going to feed you, and I'm going to put like, you know, you into a warm room, and you're going to get a nice place to stay, and it's going to be with this person who is this. Do you know what I mean? Like there's all that kind of care. And I think that's what Andro and Eve's trying to change in the system, is like, stop thinking of artists as like a commodity, start thinking as people, and like, you know, like you're giving so much, and it's just an absolute gift. So anyway, thank you all for doing that. So that's what you've given, you know. I think, you know, you're giving a lot and you're getting a lot, but you know, you deserve a lot as well. I think that's really important to say that. So we've talked about drag beyond the binary, and I think it'd be really interesting to hear about your relationship. I think it'd be really interesting to hear about your relationship, with your own gender expression or identity, and like what drag, you know, has drag shifted that, or like made you think of it differently, or embraced different parts? So Sigi, would you like to maybe say something about that first?
Yes. I think this ties in with the documentary a bit earlier. I mentioned how I hadn't embraced my queerness for quite some time. Like I wasn't physically out to myself until I was like 18. And then it kind of came out over year after year. I was like, okay. Then there was a time when I didn't ever want to tell anyone what my gender was because I didn't feel like it was their business. But now I feel so much more confident in who I am. I think drag has a very big part to play in that. And growing up, I didn't, you know, looking at figures on TV and in films, there was no one to sort of look up to and to aspire to be for me. And I'm sure this resonates with both Wesley and Lilly as well. You don't really, I didn't see queer Asian figureheads, or let alone people who identified or who were openly sort of queer, gender fluid, that kind of thing. And so drag was suddenly this opening to say, whoa, actually you can play whatever gender you like. It doesn't really matter. And it was a validating platform for me to be able to express and play characters that I'd always wanted to play. I started the first show I did. I loved Marlon Brando and his characters. And I always wanted to just play the Godfather so I could stuff my cheeks with cotton wool and do the stupid impression. And that was like such a silly and amazing experience because I'm like, actually, this is a valid performance. What I've found over the course of my shows is that I like to play sort of traditionally very masculine roles, but giving them a very feminine twist. So they might do as a really stupid striptease, or they'll do something that you wouldn't necessarily assume that men or male-bodied figures do, like a YouTube makeup tutorial, something like that. And it's, in a way, by embracing my masculinity in drag, it's allowed me to come out in my feminine side, which I don't necessarily think I'd have contact with as myself, as Jackie.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ziggy, actually. I think that drag has done similar things for me in terms of like being able to lean into my femininity a bit more confidently. I think for my personal gender journey with drag, the more I've done drag, the more I've been curious about social ideas of gender and limited biological ideas of sex and the things we're taught about that, and actually like the fact that like we're actually like realistically, whether I'm in drag or not, like the fact that we operate in a society that operates on the gender and sex binary means that I'm actually constantly playing drag because I'm constantly being confused for men and women throughout my day, which in and of itself is a revelation about how ridiculous and bizarre those constructs are. And so for that reason, I think like for me personally, I'm just a lot more secure in my humanity and like in my right to be here, my right to be alive. Like I have a very research oriented personality, and like if I'm curious, I'll dive down the rabbit hole of information, and having drag as a portal for that as well has meant I've just like learned a lot over the past few years about how seriously politically constructed the idea of sex, like from male and femaleness, quote unquote, to man and womanness, and how like so much of that was just made in order to benefit some people. Like factually, that's just literally like the history of this country. And I've been in this country and been othered in that way, but also lived at home in Nigeria and been hyper aware of the way British history has also affected how Nigerian people limit ideas of gender and sexuality. And so, yeah, I'm thankful for drag because I think there's very, very few contexts where I would have been able to safely explore so many aspects of myself and not be punished for it, basically.
Have we lost Finn?
No,
Sorry,
I'm still here. I'm just
Okay.
listening. I'm just listening. You know, you do just like doing it beautifully. So I'm just letting you flow. Go on, Lily, get in the flow.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm slightly different in a sense because I've always identified as she and her, and I've been and I very much love my feminine side, but I think in a sense what drag has given to me, and especially um dating a trans mask non-binary drag king, it's in some ways seeing, especially with drag kings, it's drag has given me permission in order to explore it. At least I've never really explored my masculinity. I think for me, because I've always just been like, well, I identify as she, her, and I'm quite comfortable with that. I'm quite very comfortable with my femininity, like very comfortable, and I do very much enjoy playing on that femininity. But drag has also allowed me, because my partner Mark, who was a drag king, dressed me, did my makeup as a drag king, and I was like, I want the whole shebang. I was like, bind me, bind. And when they say binding, basically, they take your breast tissue as so, and literally pull it straight across with physio tape, and it goes underneath your armpit, round here, from the nipple right across. Now I'm a G cup, so that's quite a lot of mammary glands to be shoved across. And do you know what? Like, it was an incredible sense of power. Just having this, instead of doing my makeup more feminine, having this like chiseled, it was dipping into something that I never even knew was possible and open to me to be able to do. And because whenever I think of like like power, or a lot of people tend to think, especially with Asian women, it's a lot of like doming. It's very like in a dominatrix kind of sense. So it's a very sexy but still a very feminine. It's not a I don't know how I'm like wording this because I don't feel like I'm wording this correctly, but the power felt very different because I packed, I wore a suit, I wore an open chest suit, and it was just like I was very uncomfortable, and my back was killing me after 20 minutes. So to anyone who binds in that way, like, so much like respect, and that's a lot. But it was the fact that drag had given me permission to explore something that I felt I guess in some way wasn't really permitted to touch in some way. And that's what I love about drag. It's like going, oh actually, yes, you can explore all these things without being judged, without being and I think it's an incredible feeling. I think in some ways, I think everybody needs to try switching it around, or like trying something else and dipping into, give yourself permission because you have it. Like, I think it's like incredible.
Yeah, I think that kind of fluidity is inherent in drag, and I think that's one of the things that mainstream culture seems to like lose. That we don't see the fact that there are many performers who are constantly just moving between and playing with the fact that masculine in feminine, and masculine doesn't belong to maleness, and and actually someone's in the chat here said, I was confused by Finn's overview of gender identities because I've used the term male and female in terms of gender. And when we're trying to talk to people outside of the LGBT community to keep biological sex terms separate from gender, and I think that's a really important point. I think it's really easy to to slip into that, and of course I'm from a world that is heteronormative, and unfortunately I've been conditioned to think like that. And especially I grew up before the internet and before my education has really happened. Drag's done for me is it educated me beyond binaries, and that's why I think this event is exciting and important, because it's helped my personal understanding, but I want to bring that, Andro and Eve wants to bring that to a wider world. And it's so easy to get like slip into the those conditions we're given, aren't we?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to
Really,
say more on that, Wesley?
you really just have to be intentional about it. That's all. I think also patient with people because everyone's learning, but also I think for people who are learning, I think we need to practice being wrong. I think sometimes all these conversations about sort of marginalization and oppression and all those kind of things get severely distracted by the fact that people feel guilty about making mistakes, and it's just like, I don't care. If I'd rather you took 2 seconds and went, oh shit, sorry, my bad. I'll make sure I'm on that next time. And we moved along. And then you spent the next 40 minutes apologizing to me. Like I've just lost 40 minutes of my life.
Yeah. Well, it's exactly the same. Like I've been constructed white. I'm going to be racist at times, and I'm going to get it wrong. And you
keep it moving. Like, that's all.
Let's learn it, move on. Yeah, exactly. It's really important. And I think there's a much more awareness raised now, isn't there, about this. And someone's just asked the question, which is not going to be an easy question. They just asked, can the artist tell us what they think the difference is between sex and gender?
Oh, pop quiz. I personally, when someone says to me, "You're thinking about sex," I understand that to be whatever social version of like genitalia is what people are referring to. That's how I understand it. And gender for me is about how somebody feels in their body. It's not even about gender presentation. It's just about how they feel inside of their body. And I think for me, when I was younger, I spent a lot of time having very fluid feelings about gender in my body, feeling detached from femininity because, to be honest, misogyny and patriarchy make femininity feel like a weapon and violent. And so leaning into masculinity, but then finding myself being extremely stereotyped, specifically as somebody who was a Black person and like a Black person who isn't a man. I was being extremely stereotyped in my masculinity to be a certain way. And so it was very helpful for me to discover like sex and gender presentation, all these things being like things that are really not connected, really, like, to be honest, like and that's my understanding of sex and gender. I don't know if the other two want to.
No, absolutely 100%. That's what I was you've phrased it so beautifully. That's exactly what it would go down to. Yeah.
And same, like that's how I've learned and had to obviously relearn a lot and so much stuff. And there are some people that I know where every time I meet them, I check their pronouns, because sometimes they don't want the pronouns that they used the day before. So it's just like retraining to just constantly ask. I now make it like just conditioning yourself to just ask. And it's just so easy. And it's just like and it's really nice now because it's not becoming, I mean, for me, in my experience, it's not becoming a shock of asking, being like, hi, my name's Lily. What are my pronouns are she, her, what are your pronouns? Like, it's just like an extension of how are you? Which I think is really, really nice. But yes, that is my understanding. Wesley put it very, very beautifully.
Fab. Well, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we've got lots of questions from our audience. So I think that would be, we've already answered a few actually. So we're doing quite well. We're getting through them. So we've got a few more. But I think I'm going to go to this question, which is, we kind of have an understanding of the drag scene. So one of you might want to give us a bit of an overview about how the drag scene feels. But then what would you like to see change in the UK drag scene? So Lily, do you want to give us a bit of an overview about how it feels? And then what would you like to see it change?
What do you mean by feels?
Like how, I mean, because I navigate the drag scene from a very, like, I live in Yorkshire, I see it down in London. It sometimes feels a bit removed. And the stuff that happens in Sheffield, and of course the stuff, but like I feel like where in London, there's a lot more shows going on. There's a lot more people around. I bet you can walk into a bar and bump into another drag artist. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, okay,
yeah.
It is, I mean, pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, because obviously things are a little bit different now, especially with social distancing seating, and when you weren't allowed to like cheer, or like clap or stand up, or it's it felt like performing to like your parents, you know, when you're like a kid, you're like, I'm gonna put on a show for you, like mum, dad, and they're like, that's very nice. So that's what it kind of felt like, because obviously when you're not allowed to cheer and you're like doing a burlesque striptease and they're like, feels a bit weird. So obviously I'm going to talk about it pre-COVID. It was I mean, obviously each show is different and each venue is different. So that's what I love about different types of shows that you go to. You go to one show and it's just like hot, sweaty, sticky, loud, and it's like you can just feel, like you go into some shows and it's like sexual tension, heat, and you're like, oh yeah, and that puts you in a completely different. Wesley's laughing at me, but I know you want it, I know you feel it. So and then obviously you walk into some shows and it's very much like your queer family, where it feels wholesome, you feel relaxed, it's chilled, and you can like, it's not so much about like, you know, people are going to be entertained. So it's like, feelings wise are very, very different. You can get a different type of atmosphere, you know. It's that like London is like a dib dab of like drag performances that you can get, because there is in some ways such a beautiful selection. And I'm going to say this very loosely, it is very diverse. Now, one of the things when I talk about diversity, it is in a sense of you get different diversities, but all of the same color. Whereas, and, you know, types. What I would like to see change is, I would like to see producers take more responsibilities. I would like to see producers not just be like, I'm going to put on a show, but I'm going to book 4 cis male drag queens, 1 drag queen, and 1 AFAB queen, which majority of the times is usually me, because I get 2 tick boxes in one. So I would like to see less tick box drag. I find it very frustrating and I find it very insulting, to the point where I do add on a token tax to my fee. If I find out that I ask who the lineups are. If I find out that I am the only AFAB or person of color, then I add on £50 to my fee, and I very strongly recommend that other performers do the same. And until that tax will not be taken off until your lineups are diverse and include more than 1 drag king, or include more non-binary performers, or drag things, as some performers like to be called. That is what I would really like to change. I'm tired of being your tick box, basically. And if you want it, you're gonna have to pay for it. Is how I see it. And like, I get very frustrated. I'm very passionate about this, because there's no excuse. There is no excuse when you have collectives like the Cocoa Butter Club that literally are like an agency who can find you performances. When you have like the collectives like the Bit and Peach, which I run, I will share your casting. I don't need a fee. I want my performers to get, like, I want the people who are part of the collectives to get these jobs, because I'm tired, but I'm not going to do your job for you. You're going to have to either pay me to do your job for you, or you're going to have to pay me to be in your show. And it's a lot more. It gets very frustrating. Sorry, I get going on a massive tangent here, and I can speak for hours on it. But I would like that to change in a sense of like, despite the fact the amount of diversity of drag that London has to show and the UK has to show, people need to start working. That if you want to be a producer, then you need to work and be at it. It is not your performer's responsibilities to get these people for you. It is your job. Okay.
Well said. Well said. Sigi, what would you like to see change?
I'm afraid I don't have the same kind of I can completely see Lily's how tired you are about your just constantly having to fight. I still feel so kind of like very much new to it. I mean, you know, it's been a few years, but I still feel like I'm still very excited about being part of the scene. And not that you aren't excited, Lily, but I'm kind of like, there's still, for me, there's a real momentum. And especially when it comes to drag kings and the kind of exposure and visibility that they're getting, it is still, however, a long way to go in terms of the amount of visibility that they have compared to drag queens. It's a very similar story when you talk about race as well. It's almost the same kind of situation where one group is kind of seen as the mainstream thing and therefore is snatched on by producers who are essentially too lazy to kind of educate themselves about anything outside of that. And I'm gonna bring up the most recent example of the Little Mix video. What was the confetti, and the fact that they dressed up as drag kings and had famous drag queens on there, but without thinking or realizing or considering that there were also famous drag kings in the scene, if it's in London, that they can allude to. And it's almost, it essentially boils down to a commodification of the drag king aesthetic that they're not kind of paying homage to. So it's almost kind of, it goes back to this kind of the thing that RuPaul and RuPaul's Drag Race has done. It's created an incredibly amazing platform and mainstream, mainstreaming of the drag queen aesthetic and art without bringing the drag kings along. Instead, they are still a rather obscure piece of art that exists in the subculture and in cabaret venues as in a lot of situations as the token. And I think that is what I would want to change. I would want to change the visibility of drag kings as an art form that can be seen on the same level as drag queens.
Yes. What about you, Wesley?
UK drag scene. I think personally for me, like I don't have high expectations of the West in general. That doesn't change as the scenes get smaller, to be honest. And so I am very gleeful to have come back into my drag at a point where the Cocoa Butter Club exists and I can really be in the space of drag surrounded by people who look like me and have my experience and who I don't have to be on for, like as soon as I arrive, even before the show starts. I think that somebody said something about gay male subculture and RuPaul's Drag Race in the question and answers. I think that we are literally in the United Kingdom. The majority of the people in this country are white people. And what would need to change really is that white queens who are constantly in this position of power have to show up at shows and go, oh, all of us look like me. Well, I'm not going on stage. Like, that's what it has to be. Like, I think a lot of people don't realize that, like, not don't realize, but are always sort of on that cusp of like, oh, what can I do? And like, when what you have to do requires you giving stuff up, suddenly it's a bit more like, oh, you mean like I have to say no to that gig so that someone else can get paid? It's like, yes, that's what you have to do. And I think like no matter what else, anything else that happens like in the world, like whether Little Mix does a video or RuPaul's Drag Race goes into season 54 and 2068 or whatever, like as long as queens keep showing up to those gay things that are like commodifying kings and not saying, why don't you guys have any kings? Why have you got us? Then nothing's really going to change, right? Because ultimately, I don't think the mainstream really ever sort of, there's a barrier of humanity between our experiences and the mainstream commodifying it. And so for all we, like, I imagine that a lot of people are going to go and try drag based off of Little Mix's video, but won't even know where to look for support, like in that, which is also just very unfortunate for them as well. So yeah, I think my thing that I want to change is people being more willing to give up, make space by giving up some of the power that they have, because literally nothing will change otherwise. Like, and also maybe like, I think there's something about London that makes people just feel like I can just produce a show. Like, people just love calling themselves producers in London, man, and they just don't know what, like, they don't know what they're doing. Just book it anyhow. They don't have no money. Like, they haven't looked up no safer space policy. They're just like, oh, I want to do it. I think they just want to go to a show and they decide to put one on, and it's like, you did this the wrong way around. So that would be good for a few people to sort of think through what producing actually is before they decide they want to embark on that venture. I think that would be super helpful. I guess I could sort of answer this person's question who said something about,
I was going to say we kind of that RuPaul thing. How do you think that we could talk about visibility, but just I think Lily wanted to say something about producing, and I've got something about producing as well. Go on, Lily, what were you going to say?
I have had quite a few messages. Hi, I want to put on a show. Can you tell me how to do it? And I'm like, sure, my fee is this for my time. Or if you do want to put on a show, these are the things you need to think about. Bam, 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 bam. They're like, oh, that's quite a lot. And I'm like, yes, it is. Good luck. But also a little bit of like Little Mix tea. No one there had, besides like the extras, didn't even know what drag kings were. And even the person who created all the beards for them does actually produce them for drag kings. When they mentioned it, they were like, oh, what's that? They had no clue. And it also doesn't help that Rue Fracker is calling it macho drag. Sorry, I can't.
That's amazing.
calls it macho drag. For your mini challenge, get into macho drag. Why don't you just call it what it is?
Yeah, that was weird.
Stop belittling it. I'm very passionate about a cup of tea.
Well, fair. Get the tea out. I mean, honestly, macho drag. It's like kings are some of the most feminine.
I know.
You see Benjamin Butch swan across the stage. You're like, I'm not going to call it that, are you? I mean, it's all just a play on gender. It's crazy. But I remember, it's funny you say that about London and producers because I remember when I had started out doing Andro and Eve, and also at the same time had started out as a producer, and I've worked in theatre 15 years, and before that I'd been a set and costume designer, and I'd kind of gone, no, do you know what? That's not for me. I don't want to just be. I want to be the producer. I want to make things happen, and I want to change things. So I think the producer actually has a bit more. Saying what happens. And I remember talking to someone from London, and we were at some show, and I said, oh, I'm a producer now. And they went, oh, are you? And I went, yeah, I'm doing a big parade in Hull for the City of Culture. We're doing a massive street thing, close the streets. And he went, oh, you're actually doing producing? And I was like, what? Do people what do you mean do it? I'm not going to call myself a producer if I'm not actually doing it. But now you've explained something to me there, Wesley. You've really, I guess that must what happen in some places, that you don't know about risk assessments and road closures and licenses or insurance for your performers, Wow, yeah, crazy. Yeah. So we've got some really good questions, and I feel like we have covered this Emmy's question a bit, but I think there is a bit been how has it impacted the visibility of LGBTQ plus people? I think we all know it's not really very non-binary inclusive.
Yeah.
In terms of visibility, has anyone got anything to say about that?
Do you want to say something, Sigi?
I have to say I haven't watched the latest series, to be honest, and the thing is, because it's just, I guess it's a nice way for, imagine in London, we're quite spoiled because it's such a vibrant community. But if you imagine there are people out there living in small villages or towns or cities outside London who may not have access to queer culture in such a way, and yet RuPaul is something, is it BBC? Is it or not? Yeah. It's such a large and easy way of accessing that culture that maybe, like what I said earlier, young people will find solace in, because they're like, this is really exciting way to investigate and explore gender. I guess that's, to me, I guess that's one of a positive a positive note about it, that it could potentially help in that way. But yeah, I'm not a great person to answer that, because I don't really know much about it.
I mean, I've watched it, and I have watched most of it. I like to watch it because then I also like to get angry at it, because I'm a big fan at yelling at the TV. I've turned into a right curtain peeper as well during lockdown. Just completely changed. And I think it is really great, especially with the UK one with Ginny Lemon and with Bimini, who do identify as non-binary. And I found that really, really wonderful, because they did have, Ginny and Bimini had a really wonderful conversation about being non-binary. But what I find really frustrating is during the competition and during the judging that they're misgendered the entire way through.
Constantly.
So I feel like what frustrates me about RuPaul's Drag Race is, yes, you are bringing a lot of different gender identities into light. However, you're not respecting people's actual pronouns. You're not actually, it feels very shallow to me. But also, like Sigi said, yes, you're right. In London, we are very spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
We are really spoiled. And if you are, a 14, 15-year-old human being who is struggling with their gender identity, and there you see something on, just to know that somebody else is feeling maybe the same way as you are, that must be a really wonderful feeling.
Yeah.
It must be such a wonderful feeling. I think the closest thing that I ever saw on TV that I was like, maybe, was China in was it China in, oh no, what's it called, the Xena Warrior Princess, Xena.
Yeah, right.
That was the closest to that I could feel, ever, because she looked, she had slightly almond eyes, but she was like,
Balance.
I was like, I don't know, I have feelings about this. Do you know what I mean? But she was having feelings about, what's her name? Do you know what I mean? So it's like when you find something that gets you go, oh, me too. It's really, really lovely. But at the same time, I feel that RuPaul is basically ticking all the boxes, trying to make sure that they're looking as diverse and as inclusive. But I find it very shallow, in my opinion.
Yeah. One of the audiences said, RuPaul shallow, surely not. Rattlesnake. Very nice comment there. Excellent.
Should have had the sound thing on my phone, just like my own little
soundtrack.
Yeah. We're gonna answer Ivan's question. It's a lovely question to ask you all. What was your journey with building your drag character, and what stage did you feel really confident with your character? Truly confident,
I don't even know if it's truly confident yet. I think I think my personal drag has reached a place where I feel comfortable experimenting. I think actually when I first started drag, you sort of get into your head an idea of what you think you're doing, and then you sort of stick to that until you find out that actually people do more things with it, and then it's like, oh, okay, cool. And I think getting more and more comfortable with having ridiculous ideas and trying them out, especially after being exposed more to the London drag scene specifically, I think that's been sort of the the sort of best part of like understanding what my drag is and like what I want to do with my drag and how I want to play with my drag. And to be honest, I think like that's what I watch RuPaul's Drag Race for the contestants. Like that's why I watch it. It's because I feel like they're going on a very micro rapid version of that journey, like coming in thinking this is who I am, and then 2 episodes in they're like, fuck, I didn't know I sucked at this. Okay. Or that this made me so nervous or so anxious, or that like there are things that I don't have this drag confidence in, and that now they're being like very severely challenged on it. And that's what I think I enjoy about it, is that I think people choose to come on there for that, for themselves, and that's really nice. I think RuPaul is a self-confessed capitalist, as Lilly said, that he's fracking. Like, so I'm not looking at him for my revolution in any way, but I think, like you said, Sigi, there's a lot of people who benefit from that visual, and I think understanding that for my own drag as well, that like actually showing up and being on stage in my drag, like there are people who see me and are just like, oh whoa, like cool, I can do this or you can do that, and I'm like, oh, it's nice to know that I'm also like an instigator for someone else's creative process. And that's what I feel confident in. I think the nature of gender means that I'm never ever sitting very comfortably in any sort of character persona, because it's just like always moving for me.
Yeah, Sigi, you create lots of different characters, don't you?
Yes, so it's quite a tricky question to answer, but I think the first year I didn't really know what my biography was, simply because I didn't know what my character was, and it was only maybe until the first, after 4 or 5 different shows, that I began to recognize the format and also a pattern that was forming in all of my characters. They're all kind of, like I mentioned earlier, these traditionally macho, villainous characters that then have a twist, and that is that they expose a very feminine side to them that is both enthralling and also shows a very wonderful side to masculinity, whilst questioning our view on femininity in a way. To give an example, I mean, the format I always have in the past few shows is I do an intro, and then I kind of grab the microphone and shout at the audience in a really weird voice for a few minutes, explaining my problem or my desire. And then the final piece is a twist that maybe it's a bit unexpected. So one of my characters is Charles Bronson, a very dangerous British villain. He's like the most dangerous man in Britain, and he's still incarcerated. And there's a film about him with Tom Hardy, and I took some of the footage from that film, and I took an idea of it, and it was like, this man, all he wants is to become famous. That's his number one goal. But what is it about him that makes him want to do it? And he ends up kind of scaring everyone, taking an audience member, tying them up. This is not COVID friendly. I can't do this act for a while now. Ties an audience member up and then paints their face. And the face painting is done in the form of a YouTube makeup tutorial, because he's like, this is how I can get famous in today's modern world, isn't it? But it's very funny, and it's also, there's moments where it's scary and you don't know what's happening. And I guess that is at that moment when I realize there's a trajectory, there's a story, there's a message, and there's a really strong character, that's when I feel confident. But it comes at every show. I still, like if I'm working on a show at the moment and I still don't feel confident in that. So I'm constantly rebuilding my character as I go along. In a way, it's like in the way if you're an actor and you take on a new role, you have to kind of feel comfortable in it as well. But it still has a very uniting kind of theme, and that is masculinity exposing issues around gender and femininity.
Lily, do you want to talk a little bit about your character? Like where, how do you feel right
Yeah.
it now?
So in the very, very beginning, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Originally, I actually just wanted to do classical burlesque. I wanted the fancy, sexy costumes. I wanted to do the bump and grind. And then it wasn't until I met a couple of performers actually, who used to go by the name as Mr. Mistress at the time, who was a boylesque performer, who then changed their name to Meth, and then changed it to Me the Drag Queen. So I have known Me the Drag Queen for a very, very long time. And I would basically, when I started at the time, you would have to kind of like earn your way. So a lot of the times I did stage management for cabaret shows, and I would do this in character. So then drag stage managers were seen and not heard. Like you're just meant to be, you were called kittens. You would go on stage in sexy outfits and you would pick up underwear and be like, ooh, underwear. And then that was pretty much it. But I like to describe myself as the goose from Warhorse. If anyone has seen Warhorse, there is a puppet goose who literally steals the entire show. And it's just a person in this goose, and this goose is just trying to get into the front door, but the door is constantly being shut on them. And the goose gets the biggest applause out the whole entire thing. And I was always told in drama school, no matter how small your part is, be the goose. And I was like, oh, be the goose. So as I was doing these stage management things during one time, I was still developing. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just learning how cabaret shows worked, how burlesque shows worked, how drag shows worked, but picking up stuff and networking. And during a show, I had to clean up a water pour and pick up everyone's clothes and set up a fire performer's table with all of their items. And during the time, the host was just going, next on stage, I would like to bring on, but I was halfway through cleaning up. I hadn't gotten the table. I hadn't got anything. And then out of my mouth came, no, I'm not ready yet, you stupid white man. And lo and behold, Lily's voice was then kind of found. So I then started to focus on Western stereotypes of Southeast Asian women. And really then I started looking at all of the microaggressions, all of the discriminations that were put upon me as an Asian woman, especially with people assuming that I can't speak English. And I would play this game quite a lot when I was working as a waitress, where people would try and speak to me as if I didn't speak English. And I would speak to them in an Asian accent, and then speak to the next table in the most purest RP accent that I could muster, just so then
I love
they
it.
would feel like idiots. Yeah, I got tipped. So because they would feel so bad. So it just every time I went to the table, I would be like, "Want your food okay for you?" And then go to the next table and be like, "Would you like to see the dessert menu?" So that's kind of like how Lily kind of started to like develop on like the journey, while I was stage managing, and then I became basically a stage managing sidekick to the host. So then I was allowed to speak. People wanted me to speak. People liked this idea of me essentially being a bottom. I don't know, is that the right term?
That depends. Is it true?
Yeah, the hierarchy of like the host and the stage manager, but the power was always going to be switched. So people really liked the play on that. So for me, and I only stopped stage managing 4 years ago. So really 4 years ago, when I felt I was confident enough to then start hosting, because many people wanted me to host years ago, and I just didn't feel comfortable because I hadn't really found Lily's voice yet in that sense. And I'm still learning with Lily, because Lily, for me, when she was first created, she was somebody who was like fresh off the boat. Like she didn't really speak that much English, and now Lily's Lilly's accents change, and it is still changing. You know, the longer she stays in England, the more her accent adapts to the people around her. Her clothing changes. Her, you know, she's living, I like to kind of think as Lilly Snatchdragon is living in real life, in a sense of all the interactions that she creates as and further she goes on. So I don't think I'm ever really going to feel completely confident with Lilly, because she's just like a real human being to me as this character, where she's constantly developing and constantly changing.
Yeah.
But you know, that's kind of like where she's kind of like developed in that sense.
Thank you for that honesty. It's really wonderful to hear how they've all, you know, those characters have changed. I'm aware we're coming towards the last sort of 15 minutes, so we've got, can you answer this question quite quickly, which is tips for zapping the fear and getting on stage? So, you know, people who are maybe doing not bedtime drag, no, what's it called? Not bedtime drag. Yes, I just get into drag and I go to sleep. People who are doing it in their bedrooms but not outdoors, how can you get out there and have a go? Is that, you know, Wesley, how would you get on stage? What's your tip?
What's my tip? My tip, the first thing that came to mind when I read that question was to, one, remember actually that like you want to be on stage. Like that's one thing I think people can forget when your first time or you're nervous or whatever, like you actually love it. Like that's why you're trying to get up there. You fucking love it. So one, you need to own that sort of like attention whore wanting, like give me that love. You need to own the fact that you want it and that you deserve it, and that you are stepping on stage because you want to get to a place where you feel really confident on stage. I think that's one thing to remember. And then also remember that the fear isn't bad. For me, fear always reminds me that I care. Like if I'm at a show I don't really want to be at, then I'm probably not that pressed. If you see about behind the scenes and I'm not like pacing up and down or practicing the toilet or something, then I might not care that much about the show. To be honest, like being afraid for me is like the cue that like, oh, I really care about like what people are about to see and like the work that I'm about to do, and like I respect that feeling like inside of my body. I don't try and push it anywhere. Also, I just said attention whore. I'm a sex worker friendly person, so I don't mean that in any offensive way at all, in case that was inappropriate for some people. Yeah, and then I think that's probably my two top tips.
Yeah, Sigi, can you give us a couple of tips, or even just one tip?
Yes, I was thinking. So nervousness. Someone told me the other week, nervousness is just another word for excitedness. And you have to think of it that way. You have to be positive, that, like Wesley said, you are on stage for a reason, because you want to be there. But also the drag and the cabaret scene is actually such a lovely crowd. Like there's very rarely you'll get a chance where people be critical and think of you. And, you know, if you do something, a mistake, people are not going to boo. People are going to be like, come on, I want you to succeed. Yeah. So that's really important to think about. Like people want you to do well and they want you to entertain them. So you have to constantly think positive. And I guess as another little tip, record yourself. It's a horrible thing, but if you record yourself and you watch yourself back, then you will begin to understand how you look, and you'll become to get less scared of how you appear to yourself and therefore how you appear to others. Yeah, that's my tip. Top tip.
Okay, so Lilly, give us one last tip. Have you got anything you can add?
Besides everything that Wesley and Sigi have said already, before I go on stage, I always say to myself, dolphin dive in. And it's something that I've always said to myself. It kind of a little bit like Jigs's water off a duck's back. It's because dolphins don't think when they dive, they just do it because they love it. And that's what happens. They just dive in. Also, when you're on stage, it's too late.
Yeah.
It's another way, like either it's too late. That's too great. Late. I still get scared taking off my corset or taking off my bra because I still have self-confidence issues. It's too fucking late. I'm on stage, right? So either be shit, which for me as a performer isn't an option, or just own it. And
Yeah.
like Sigi said, if you make a mistake, people want you to succeed. They really do. Just know your character, know what it is that you're trying to get, what is the message that you want to say, or even if it's not a message, you just want to, you know, make sure that the message is clear. Make sure that if you want to do any kind of reveals, make sure that those work really cleanly. And the main thing is the nervousness and all that stuff, but use that energy, give out your energy. You will get as much as you give, as much as you give. It's a give and take relationship. So just own it. Own it for that one moment. Just remember that you're in drag, you're in a character. So even if you have to pretend for 2 seconds, this is not you, this is your drag character, believe it.
Yeah.
Because everyone in the audience really does believe in you. I
Yeah.
believe in you.
It's true.
So just do it. What's the worst that can happen?
I would add, find a scratch night near you.
Yeah.
Well, people are trying to do a lot more of those nowadays, to give people space to play. So like, look for a scratch night. And it's totally true what Lily says about owning it, because like half the time I go on stage and then I get out of drag and people literally don't even know it was me anyway, so it's fine.
In Sheffield, we've got our Rate Queer Do, which has open mic slots. They're very available for people to try out stuff. And then we also have Sounds Queer, and they do a scratch night. They used to do it at Dina. I don't know, who knows after the pandemic what will be there, but there'll be someone. Now, this is a great question, says, I'd like to know what queer or queerness means to the artist and how that shapes your performance. So if any of you want to answer, maybe we don't have to hear from all of you, because I know we've got another question after that as well to answer, but how does queerness shape your performance? Does it?
I'll go, sure. How does queerness shape my performance? Firstly, what does queerness mean to me, I think was the first part of that question. Queerness to me is, queerness to me is like those parts of yourself that you're just like, so like, it's that voice in your head that's like socially correcting you away from yourself, when it changes to socially correct you towards yourself. Like, that's what queerness is to me, when everything that I used to believe about myself being like a fault or a problem has turned into the reason why I love everything about who I am, and the things that buoys me. Is that how you say that word? The ship one, the B-U-O-Y word.
Yeah.
Buoyed, is that how you say it? Yeah, that like keeps me afloat. So that's what queerness means to me. And it comes into my performance in that it's like a running energy that keeps the show going, because Wesley's a very sexy character, and like I play with Wesley to really challenge people about what they think desire is, and like what they think their gender identity or their sexuality is, whether they're queer or lesbian or gay or whatever thing. Everyone finds Wesley sexy, and I can see that when I'm performing, because I'm on stage watching the crowd, and that, like I said, how bizarre that is, that's queerness for me. Like, that keeps me moving.
Fabulous. Lily, what about you? Do you want to say anything on it, or?
If I'm honest, I guess I'm still discovering it. I came out really late, so I'm still discovering in that journey.
It's late.
I know, but better late than never. So I'm like, I'm still discovering what it means to me, because I think I'm still learning how to be honest with myself and not trying to keep resetting myself to human default. But I do enjoy playing with queerness and gender, in a sense where it's changed Lily's mind a lot, in a sense of like just how I approach things, how I speak to things. Originally, Lily came to the UK to look for a British passport, but it's not for a husband anymore. It's for anyone who will take her. But she's also trying to get out of this country now, but she's stuck because she's not meant to be here, because this country is going to shite. But she can't get out because she's stuck. She came here illegally. So it's just like having to figure out, like, she'll discover anyway. So I'm still trying to figure that out, if I'm going to be really honest. But being queer for me is being unapologetic. And I think that's really lovely, being unapologetic for who you really feel like you are, and owning that that not being apologizing, which for me is, I think, is really nice, because I'm a big fan of constantly saying sorry.
Just to add to that, a quick thing. For me, queerness is, it's this wonderful umbrella term that it means that we can kind of live beyond, queer as a label, but we can live beyond the labels that existed years ago when people were thinking about sexuality as a thing, and you'd had lesbians, gays, butches, femmes, and all the other kind of labels that people kind of decided to put themselves in. And queer is this wonderful term, which means it doesn't really, in a way, it can matter, but it doesn't have to matter. You can say you're queer, and regardless of what how exactly you identify. And for me, I think that's really powerful. It's the wonderful way of unifying audiences to say, yes, we want to be in this environment because we also have, embraced this queerness, this alternative way of seeing gender, sexuality, and all these other different things that, would have otherwise been seen as labels or in little boxes that put people as separate.
Yeah. I think, yeah, that's such a good point. I mean, historically, the word queer has not been a nice term for a lot of people, and it still carries that baggage, and I'm really aware of that for a lot of people, that they would never use that term to identify. But I think you're right in terms of forming a community, because it's people who just have an alternative way, or going against the grain of, and forming a community that feels like it gathers a lot of people together. It's like, it's a lot more fluid. So that feels really nice. Thank you all. Right. One last question, and you've got to answer this in 20 seconds. If you had no limit on budget and staging, what is a dream performance you'd like to do?
Okay, I've got mine.
Okay, go.
I have a big, massive dream of combining traditional Asian art forms with cabaret, circus, burlesque. So it's a big, beautiful journey of having like a traditional gamelan playing in the background with a drag king, having, a full-on like Chinese opera, but in drag. I just want to combine these traditional art forms in a very non-disrespectful way, but also challenges, especially in Asia, for like gender norms and identity, especially queer identity. So it challenges that, and shows that burlesque can be sexy, and it's not wrong, and it's not shameful, and mixing that with loads of different art forms. And that is a massive dream of mine. I will be applying for funding.
Can't wait. Sigi, anything?
Oh my goodness, this is such a hard question.
Okay,
I've
I'll
had
get
like
back to you,
all these
Wesley.
things
Do you
swirling
wanna-
through my head. I think if I love Lily's idea. I'm like, I wish I could steal it.
Booked. You're in.
What if we do, oh God. Okay. I'm going to put it out there. This is one, but of many. What if I had, it was an all queer, all kind of mixed up, diverse, varied performance production of a really classic Shakespeare play like Hamlet. I think they're doing that, but they're only doing ages, so anyone can play anyone.
Othello, please do Othello.
Everything, like all of the men are women and all of the women are men, and everything else is just turned upside down. And then you stage it in some massive venue.
Great. Wes, what are you going to do with your unlimited budget? Oh, can you unmute yourself?
Unlimited budget. Okay, I did this one act a few years ago. This is like just to play around at a boy box thing where it was like the nativity story, but like told through like the songs by like Drew Hill, the like old school boy band. And so I like love the idea of doing like a bit much bigger sort of like fairy tale or fables based sort of like play, but then it's all just like R&B groups and hip hop songs as the sort of like scene changing and lip sync script stuff. So yeah, that'd probably be what jumps out of my head at the moment.
Nice, amazing. Thank you all so much for your contributions to our panel tonight. It's been just brilliant to hear from you all and hear your, you've just been your honesty. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Festival of Debate for hosting this event and making this event possible. If you have enjoyed this event, there might be other things in their programme that you can enjoy. I'm sure they can post something with links. Andro and Eve is doing another event next week. It's Drag Beyond the No, hang on, that's tonight. Oh my goodness. No, I mean, goodness me, I'm just doing this forever. No, it's to an event called a Gender Exploration Workshop. I've just put it in the chat. And that's a much smaller crowd, and it's just going to be limited to 20 people to explore gender away from drag and away from, and it's about people's personal experience of wanting to explore gender. It's not about performance, it's about self-expression. And we've got Christian Adore, who is a drag king, but also identifies as non-binary outside of drag. So we're going to be talking to them and looking at lots of different things to do with gender. So feel free to come back, get a ticket. You can also get a copy of Centazine. This has the stories of LGBTQ people from across the north of England. I'm aware that tonight we have had lots of artists on our panel who are from the south. There was going to be someone from the north, but unfortunately, maybe, I don't know, the north wasn't forgiving. She couldn't be here tonight. So we've got this instead. You can get that on our website, and 50% of the profits go to the Racial Justice Network, so get a copy if you haven't already got one. But thank you again to Sigi, Lilly and Wesley. Make sure you go and follow them on their socials and support them, because live performance will be coming back soon, and we cannot wait to be able to see our favourite drag artists again, and go and share and support their work. And if you've liked the event tonight, you can tweet it as Andro and Eve, and we're on Instagram, Facebook, so we always love to hear from you. And sign up to our newsletter to be the first people to hear about our upcoming offers and when we'll return to live events. Hopefully it won't be too long, but thank you everyone. We've got some nice comments coming in the chat. Everyone's enjoyed this a lot. So yeah, hopefully we'll all be back in real queer spaces before too long. Yeah, it's really great to hear from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, lovely.
I know, so nice to see everyone in person. Yay! Thank you, everyone. Go and get a brew.